The next person is another wonderful individual, Mrs. Ozioma from knowledge class. Is going to demonstrate some of the analysis that we've done with Python and SQL. Mr. Ozioma, your time starting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sam. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And my name is Ozioma, like Dr. Sam said. Can we all see my screen?
Yes, you can see your screen.
Okay. So we also, beyond what Seun described from Excel, we also, for the course, we did Excel, we did SQL, and then we also did Python. And we learned a lot. For SQL, I'm going to be looking at some of the things we learned from SQL and Python. From SQL, we learned MySQL and PostgreSQL. And I want to share with us some, still on the earthquake table, some of the things we found out about earthquakes. We dealt with a table with 23,119 rows and 10 columns. So what did we find out about earthquakes? First of all, we looked at the causes, and we found out there are three main causes. There's a natural earthquakes, there's the nuclear explosion, and the explosion. But one other thing we found out is that most of the earthquakes that had happened within the time frame covered by our data are natural, they occurred naturally, and they are the most devastating, as we can see, in terms of magnitude. And so we looked at, so earthquakes have happened as a result of nuclear explosion in 18 places, and 3 times as a result of explosions in 3 places, and more than 2,900 times for natural causes. Then we looked at magnitude and depth. Is there a correlation between magnitude and depth in terms of earthquakes? So we tried to look at the average depth, and then it gives us this result. But we tried to dig in by looking at the high magnitude earthquakes. We looked at 8 and above magnitude, 8 and above. It had occurred 8 times. It had occurred 40 times, and out of the times, only 4 times was the depth more than 100. So when we look at it pictorially, we notice that from this point to this point, the depth for this earthquakes of magnitude 8 and above. So anything above this point, this is a little over 50. Anything above this point is the exception, not the rule. That means the deep earthquakes that happened really deep, up to 600 meters below the earth level, are the exception, not the norm. Then we tried to dig into earthquakes that has happened there, and we find out that we had a count of them, and this is what it looks like pictorially. We notice here that in 2011, there's the highest number of earthquakes per year happened in 2011, and we'll find out the reason for that in a little bit. Then the next thing we looked at are the 2 maximum magnitude earthquakes. We found out that they happened twice. It happened twice, 9.1. First was Northern Sumatra caused a tsunami in Indonesia, and the one that happened in Japan with magnitude 9.1 earthquakes. And what do we learn about them? Both of them had a number of aftershocks. We see these numbers for Northern Sumatra and these numbers for Honshu, Japan. And in pictorial form, which explains it better, for a place where earthquakes never get up to more than 10 in a year, we see in Northern Sumatra is more than 35. And for Honshu, Japan, the number rose up to 265 for that year, which are all attributed to that singular magnitude 9.1 earthquake. Then the next thing we looked at, where do these earthquakes happen in the world? So we tried to focus on the longitude and latitude. This chart here shows us the realm, where these earthquakes occur in the world. Here should be the lower and the upper ridge, and there's the latitude. Now in pictorial form taken on with Python, we had to plot the longitude and latitude over a map of the world. And we can see this orange dots here and everywhere they are. And it's interesting because this region here and here make up what is called the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is a region in the world where about 90% of the world's earthquakes happen. So we see a combination of using SQL and Python to bring out information from our data. So now with this, we can learn a lot more about earthquakes, where they happen, how often they happen, how devastating they can be, and a lot about the depth. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very wonderful presentation from Mrs. Oseomon. So you can see just a snapshot of what we do in CHM, and you could see why our students are actually high profile in terms of job, getting job. Imagine someone like Oseoma going for a job interview and have to present something like this. I believe the interviewers will be very impressed. So that's exactly what we do in CHM, and that's exactly how we impart knowledge to our students. So